Good afternoon, Gills fans. Hope you're all enjoying your Sunday. Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV for our second instalment of Sunday results roundup. Having a look at all the games yesterday played in League One, and in this case, the one that was played this afternoon as well. I'm going to start in alphabetical order. AFC Wimbledon 0, Shrewsbury 1 yesterday. A bit of a surprise for me. I've got Wimbledon down to be promotion contenders this season, but they've not started great in all truth, considering the recruitment that they've made now. That's only 1 point from 2 games, I believe, considering they've brought in the likes of Cody McDonald and Abdu from Millwall and Liam Trotter, all players of good pedigree at this level. It's a little surprising the start that Neil Ardley's men have made. But on the flip side, Shrewsbury have made a great start. I've got them down to be relegated, and that's 2 games, 2 wins, and no goals conceded. So fair play to all of them, all connected with them. They've started really well. Whether they can keep it up is another matter, but for now, obviously they're enjoying it and they're up near the top of the table, so fair play. Second game yesterday was Blackburn Rovers at home to Doncaster, who obviously we drew with last week, and it finished Blackburn 1, Doncaster 3. Again, another surprise result for me. I, along with plenty, have got Blackburn down as massive favourites to win the title this season, but similarly to Wigan a couple of years ago, it looks like they're taking their time to adjust. I know they had a few injuries. I know Bradley Dack was unavailable with a hamstring strain. I'm not sure how he picked that up. But yeah, they lost 3-1, and I think they're in the bottom 4 after a couple of games. Obviously it means very little at this stage, but they've conceded 5, which is a little bit concerning for Tony Mowbray, I'm sure. One positive though is Dominic Samuel netted again. We know him from the loan spell with us a couple of seasons ago. He scored in the week as well, so that's a positive, but obviously they'd like to get that first win and even that first point as quick as possible. And again, to counter that, Doncaster, that's a very solid start for them after getting promoted. John Marquis got off the mark, and I said last week, if he can transfer his League 2 form into League 1, I think they'll finish higher than I originally predicted. Blackpool 1, MK Dons was next, and that's a great result for Blackpool, responding well after getting beat last week. So they get their first points on the ball back in League 1. MK Dons are another side that I've got to do well this season, but that's no goals in their 2 games that they've played and no points. So another team that need to get going sooner rather than later, I would think. Bristol Rovers 1, Peterborough 4 was the next one. Very poor start from Bristol Rovers. I'm a little bit surprised by that. I don't think they'll get in the playoffs this year, but I thought they'd start better than they have done. Last week they lost at Charlton, and they even played against 10 men for nearly 70 minutes, I believe, and then they've been absolutely battered at home yesterday, so a few problems for Darryl Clark and his players. But on the other side of that, Peterborough's an excellent start. They're top after 2 games. They always score plenty of goals, but just to reiterate what I said last week, it's whether they can remain consistent. They tend to be a team that will go on a great run and not lose for weeks, and then they'll go and implode and not win for the same sort of period. But they've started really well, and Jack Marriott hit a treble there yesterday, so all positive if you're a fan of the posh at the moment. Next up was Northampton Fleetwood, our old friend Justin Edinburgh. 2 games, no goals, 2 defeats for Justin. I'm not going to go into him too much, he's gone, we move on, but I've got them to get relegated this season, and they've started like a team that may struggle. Obviously the longer it goes on, the longer it takes to score that first goal, get that first point, the harder it becomes. Fleetwood have just continued where they left off last season. They're hard to beat. They've not got the best team in the world on paper, but we all know that football's not played on paper, and they've started really well again, and they sit in the top 6, and I'm sure they're going to be up there and in and around the playoffs for all of the season, to be quite honest. Next up was Oxford against Portsmouth. Both teams won last week on the opening day, but this was a massive result for Oxford in my eyes, and for Pep Clotet, their new Spanish manager. 6 points from 2 games now. For Kenny Jackett and his Pompey boys, welcome to League 1 after winning last week. You've come crashing back down to earth this weekend. But again, 2 sides that I think could be up near the top end. I think Portsmouth are getting the playoffs, and I think Oxford may just miss out. That's what I've said, but obviously they've started really well, and we all know what confidence and momentum can do for a side. Next up was Plymouth at home to Charlton. I've got these 2 to both finish sort of mid-table this season, but that's a really good result for Plymouth yesterday. Their first points back in League 1. and I think there was a double there for Jake Jervis, so that's got him underway for the season. His first goals of the season, Plymouth's first points and first win of the season. Charlton, that's only one goal in their first 2 games now, which is a little bit worrying if you're a fan of the Addicts, especially as that goal came in last week against a Bristol Rovers side that now sit bottom of the league. Rochdale v Scunthorpe, that finished 1-1 yesterday. First point for Keith Hill's men. I like Keith Hill, I like Rochdale, I think they're a very good side. He works on an absolute shoestring of a budget and does really well, and he has them punching above their weight all the time. But you'd probably have to say, if you was a Rochdale fan yesterday looking at the stats, you'd be disappointed not to win that. They had 14 shots in total, but only 4 were on target. But fair play to Scunthorpe after the disappointment of last season and missing out in the playoffs. They've started solid enough. That's 2 draws from their opening 2 games, and it gives them a base to work from. You know what you get with Graham Alexander, and they did lose a couple of players in the summer as well, so a decent enough start for the Iron. Rotherham against Southend was next, and I couldn't believe this result when I saw it. I think Rotherham will struggle. I think they've come down, and I think they'll be similar to Sunderland, going down from the Premier League to the Championship, and I think they'll find it hard to go back up. But I think they were 4-0 up at the break yesterday. They won 5-0, and apparently it could have been more. I believe there was a hat-trick in that game again as well, which was Kiefer Moore. So fair play to that. That's a great achievement. A treble, a 5-0 win gets them moving for the campaign. Southend, after last week, I think Phil Brown said the first half against Blackburn was the best he'd seen them play since he's been in charge. But I believe yesterday I read on social media that he came out and said the defenders couldn't defend, the midfielders couldn't pass or create, and the strikers couldn't attack. So that tells you all you need to know about Southend's performance yesterday. Walsall against Oldham. I've got both of these teams to struggle. I've even got Walsall to get relegated. I think John Whitney there is almost as under pressure as much as Ady Pennock is amongst Gillingham fans, and I think there's plenty on social media that think it's some sort of race between them two for who's going to be the first sack this season. But they won 2-1 Walsall and got underway for the season. Oldham, similar problems. They don't score enough, and it could be their downfall if they don't sort that out, or if they start conceding more regularly. I know they're one of the best defences last season in the league, but they just don't score enough. In terms of the Saddlers, obviously Oz Tuma's going to be massively key to them this season and how well they do, and he scored a last minute winner yesterday to get them off the mark. There was one game today which was Wigan versus Bury. Now we know Bury brought in a lot of players during the summer. Obviously that takes a lot of time to gel. I know they won last week, but they've been battered today by Wigan 4-1, and it seems that Wigan Athletic have adjusted to life back in League One really quickly. They won the league 2 seasons ago and got promoted and came straight back down, and it took them a while to adjust after life in the Premier League and the Championship, but they seem to have hit the ground running this time around. Nick Powell's got 3 in his first 2. They've scored 5 and only conceded 1 in their opening 2 fixtures, so they look like they're going to be a massive threat again this season towards the top end. Bury, again, like I've just said, if they can get their new signings to gel quick enough, then they might have a decent season. But on the flip side, if they don't, they could struggle again. And obviously they sold James Vaughan in the summer as well. And lastly, onto our game, we lost 1-0 at home to Bradford. By no means I didn't think it was a disaster of a performance. Again, we were solid enough defensively. You can maybe look at a couple of people for the goal we conceded. The cross could have been cut off early. And then Dominic Pollion, who we know is a threat with his pace and his ability to score goals, should have been picked up better in the box. But I thought we lacked creativity, which is glaringly obvious to probably 99% of our fans. And I said it yesterday on the Matchday Live, I'll probably say it again, until we bring someone in who's got a little bit of stardust and the ability to unlock a defence. But I didn't think it was a poor display. I thought we created enough, predominantly from set pieces, to nick a point. We all know that Tom Eaves had a goal correctly ruled out right at the end, unfortunately, but sadly that seemed to be the only big call that the officials did get right. I know plenty have said Connor Wilkinson should have got sent off, but for me it's not a red card, especially considering the fact that Jake Reeves in the first half absolutely assaulted Mark Byrne, I believe, and he only got a yellow. So again, it comes down to consistency. I don't think it was a red for Connor Wilkinson, but if it was, then the offence that Jake Reeves committed in the first period was as well absolutely 100%, and we should have potentially had a penalty as well for Connor Wilkinson. He was involved in a couple of the big talking points, but we didn't get that. We came out on the wrong side of these fine lines and these big decisions, and rightfully that us as fans are a bit concerned now. It's 3 games played and we haven't scored a goal yet. So that was all the games played over the weekend. In week 2 of the League One season, in terms of standout performers, I'm going to go for Nick Powell for his double. That's 3 for the season already. I'm going to go for Jack Marriott of Peterborough, who scored an excellent treble away at Bristol Rovers to send his side to the top of the league. I'm going to go for Jake Jervis, Plymouth Argyle, who scored his first goals of the season to get them up and running. And the last one was Kiefer Moore for Rotherham, an absolutely outstanding performance from him and his side as they saw off Southend by 5-0, which was probably the surprise result of the weekend for me. As always, thanks for watching. Please keep doing the usual, liking, subscribing, retweeting, spreading the word on all the social media platforms. And until next time, up the Gills.